So in limiting risk in your cross-cloud environments, there's a few things that we want to talk about. One of them is multi-cloud security. So make sure that if you can, you have a centralized security solution that is going to be, able to assess risk across all of your platforms. It may not be the easiest thing in the world to do, although there are pieces of software that can do this, but it's good to have. Also, just remember, principle of least privilege, the same thing that we use in our regular environments. Make sure that you have that applied to your cloud systems. Apply least privilege access, apply strong identity and access management protocols. Make sure you're watching what's happening in those systems, and don't get caught with a simple mistake leading to a large data loss or something like that. And then finally, protect critical assets. If you have things like key business data, intellectual property, customer info, financial data, you name it, make sure that you're aware of where it is, of what it is, how much of it you have, and what the protections actually look like on those systems. This brings us around to another very interesting presentation that we saw, and this was about breaching Amazon Web Services accounts through what we call shadow resources. So when we talk about shadow resources, what we're really talking about are resources that are generated automatically, or at least kind of automatically, during other processes in the AWS environment. And you can see a diagram of what name squatting is going to look like here. We'll decide, or we'll give you that definition as we go. But in this case, AWS automatically generates something. This is usually spawned without user intervention, and the user actually may not even notice that this particular element has now become a part of their AWS infrastructure. A lot of this comes down to services like AWS CloudFormation, and that's the one we'll talk about right now. So you may ask, what is CloudFormation? CloudFormation, just simply put, means you can automate the deployment of a lot of systems inside of something like Amazon Web Services. If there is a reasonably complex server setup that you feel like you need to deploy, multiple times over, if you need to scale out, if you want to deploy like your own large language model, which is something you can do through CloudFormation, this will automate that process. And in doing so, it generates all of these little dependencies and all these little pieces on the back end that the system needs to actually move forward. One of those might be something like an S3 bucket. If there is going to be data uploaded, or if there's going to be data saved that is associated with whatever protocol you just put through, then it will generate those things for you. And in this case, if we're uploading something like a template file from CloudFormation, it may create an S3 bucket where it holds that template file. Now, the thing about that is the predictability of that naming, and that's where this name squatting concept really comes into play. What we're doing from an attacker standpoint is we're basically trying to guess what your S3 bucket name is going to look like, and we're going to make one that looks very similar to it. Now, when we talk about Amazon S3, names are universal across all different AWS tenants. So if you create a bucket called awesome-bucket.1, you are the only person who's going to have that bucket. Doesn't matter the region, doesn't matter like which AWS tenant they're using. You're the only one who can have one with that name. That also means that if we use predictable naming and somebody figures that out, they can squat on those names. They can basically create their own resources with those names, and they can create problems. Here's an example of that happening. So this is where we're talking about getting a bucket in place before a victim actually has the ability to run their CloudFormation stuff. If I can go ahead and do that, and I can create that bucket in a namespace that is in a different region but is identical otherwise, then I can actually deny you the ability to run these systems. I can basically perform a denial of service attack just by creating this resource on my own. Now, you may be thinking like, okay, well that sounds kind of annoying. Why would you care about a denial of service attack? I could just change the name of my bucket. And you're absolutely true. You could. However, what if I take this a step further? What if I now take that bucket that I just created and I turn on public access? I make it so that anyone with any role in any tenant can access that bucket. Now, when you go to run something through CloudFormation, it's going to attempt to access that bucket, and it's going to be able to, which means it could potentially drop sensitive information in there. It could be exposing other things about your system. Or if this is someplace where you keep the template files for how your systems are actually built inside of AWS, well, I could take that over and I could now use my own templates. I could be impacting how your infrastructure is actually put together. I could be poisoning your infrastructure. I could be creating backdoors for myself. I could be doing any number of things just because I now have that same named kind of S3 bucket. So I know that one's a little technical, but we'll talk here just for a quick second about reducing your risk. So if you are going to be utilizing a system like Amazon's EC2 or CloudFormation systems, make sure that you're using obscure, unique names for S3 buckets to prevent any kind of that name squatting. If the attacker can't guess what the name of your bucket is, then this attack stops working right there. So good security tip for you. Also, strict access controls. Make sure that we are doing strong identity and access management to limit access to S3 and other resources, especially things that could potentially create new resources in our environment. We want to make sure we have CloudTrail and access logs turned on so we can see when something like this might happen. And then we want to audit regularly just to make sure that we are aware of, one, the assets that we're actually running in the cloud, and two, the potential for conflict if something is not put together in a secure formation. I've harped on this a couple of times, but I want to take a quick second just to go over it. Strong identity and access management is huge here. It is the major key. I mean, we're really looking at back to basics when we talk about how security is handled. So we want to make sure that we are improving our security, that we're meeting compliance needs, that we're minimizing the chance for human error. We want to make sure our data is kept confidential, and this can also really help streamline your IT workloads. If you're curious about software that can help with this, Tenable gave a great demonstration of some of their new Tenable One features, and they actually cover the cloud as well. They also have this great new feature called predictive prioritization, which I thought was really cool. Basically, it'll look at the number of vulnerabilities that you have, how likely they are to actually be exploited, and it can create basically a hit list for your IT and security staff so that you're taking care of your primary vulnerabilities first and not spinning your wheels on something that's still vulnerable but not as likely to actually cause you a problem. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, my name is Matt Duran, Director of Training and Research for LMG Security. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. We would love to hear from you. You can reach me at info@lmgsecurity.com, find me on LinkedIn, or follow us on Twitter. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.